videotaped. Candidates' supporters were actually prevented from entering election precincts as well. The same pattern was repeated once again in this recent by-election. The candidate herself, Harriet Nakwede, was attacked and assaulted. Many members of parliament belonging to NUP were arrested and prevented from witnessing this election. One member of parliament, Francis Zake, was brutally assaulted and is now hospitalized. This member of parliament has been beaten and injured many times by the regime, and now he's hospitalized. What was most interesting in this election was that this time the internet, unlike in January, was not cut off. So that was actually helpful in terms of collecting the evidence to show the election fraud that the regime is trying to carry out, which of course the NUP leadership is here today to reject. At an early stage after the polling ended, a privately developed voting app called YouVote was able to capture information from the declaration of results forms, which are the tallies of the total votes earned by each candidate at each of the voting precincts. And the information from YouVote showed that Harriet Nakwede was clearly winning by more than 14,000 votes. By the time the regime's election commission, or so-called election commission, announced the results, the candidate for the ruling National Resistance Movement party of dictator General Yoweri Museveni, Andrew Muwonge, had 31,830 votes, and the candidate Harriet Nakwede of the NUP party had 31,308. Let me repeat that figure one more time. And if you have a pen or pencil, please scroll it down. The candidate of the ruling party was given 31,830 votes. Listen carefully to the last three digits, 830. Harriet Nakwede was given 31,308, 380. And if you look carefully, you will see that this was a very lazy effort at rigging. The numbers 830, which are the last three digits of Muwonge's alleged results, was simply switched around, the last three digits. And that is how Harriet Nakwede ended up with 31,308. But other individuals who are here today will talk about the details of the rigging. We'll go to the details that have now been compiled in a tally sheet and a spreadsheet based on the information compiled from the YouVote app. I will not take any much more time because I want us to leave sufficient time for journalists to ask questions. And I will encourage every individual that speaks to keep it concise and brief so that we can really get to the reporters, because that is the function of a press conference. I would just like to make one more point before I ask my co-host, David Steele, if you would like to say a few introductory words before we invite the main speakers, including the new party president, Bobiwine. I would like to make the suggestion that perhaps the United States is now taking a more interested and closer look at election rigging and election theft in Uganda because of its own experience with the recent incident, the January 6th incident in Washington, DC, when supporters of a particular individual tried to disrupt the normal, smooth transfer of presidential powers. I think Americans now have a better and clearer understanding of what it means to live in a country where an individual illegally holds on to power. And the United States did make a strong statement, which we must recognize, when after the so-called elections of January 14 in Uganda, which most Ugandans believe was won by Bobiwine, who is considered by many the legitimately elected president of Uganda, the United States did issue a very important statement. The United States said the election was neither free nor fair, which is a clear indication that the United States does not recognize General Yoweri Museveni as the legitimate president of Uganda. However, there's still some shortcomings, and the leadership of the new party will today elaborate on what further actions they would like to see from the international community and the United States, in addition to providing the evidence that show conclusively that the by-election was rigged and that Harriet Nakwede is indeed the rightful winner of these elections. So before we invite the speakers, I will now turn it over briefly to my co-host, David Steele. David, do you have a few words to share? David, I think you're muted.
Thank you so much, Comrade Milton, and welcoming all those of you who are joining us this afternoon, evening, wherever you are logged in from, to this online press conference about the by-election fraud in Kayunga. As Professor Milton has quite articulately expressed, it is evident that the regime is determined to stay in power at whatever cost, and it's no longer a case of how smart they are at rigging elections, but more a case of what can you do if we decide to rig the elections so blatantly. Later on this afternoon, like Professor Milton has said, we are going to have a number of distinguished speakers, including His Excellency Robert Chagulanyi Sentamu, and the Secretary General of the NUP party. And we do invite you to pay close attention to the message, because at the end of the day, this is our opportunity to let the world know how blatant and the impunity with which the regime is operating at currently in Uganda. So thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I am David Steele, the founder of Uganda is Bleeding, which is an online demonstration and protest platform. We stand together in solidarity with Ugandans every Saturday at 2 p.m. GMT. So we'd like to invite those of you who are interested in standing with the people of Uganda to join us every Saturday. Over to you, Comrade Milton.
Thank you so much, David. So let's get straight into the press conference then. We invite the first speaker, who is Harriet Nakwede, the candidate who actually, we believe, won the by-election in Kayunga. The floor is now yours. Harriet?
Yes, good evening, Professor. I'm so happy to be hosted here this evening. Once again, my name is Nakwede Harriet, the duly elected LOC5 Chair, Kayunga, from the recently concluded by-election. I want to thank you for the opportunity that you have given to Uganda. I've read something interesting where you said, is it Uganda is bleeding? I'm happy to hear that as Kayunga is bleeding, Uganda is bleeding, and the entire world has come to notice that Kayunga is bleeding, and therefore there, where you are, you're also experiencing the bleeding of our people. I've been a candidate, just like you've mentioned, in an election that was characterized by brutality by the NRM government, which most of us believe is an imposter, especially considering the way the general elections of 2021 were conducted and rigged in the same way the ones of Kayunga have been rigged. As the people of Kayunga, we believe in change. We believe in the voice of the people. This is why even as we are going to participate in this, as you are going to engage in this election, we knew that when the voice of the people of Kayunga speak, Genome 7 and these people would be in position to listen and understand. Recently, on the 14th of December, that was the last day of our campaigns. The main candidate, Genome 7, came to campaign for the junior candidate in the race. What surprised most of us was the statement that he made, that even if you dance several times, the NRM at the end of the day will decide who will win. We thought it was a joke said, but by the appearance of that, what transpired in the whole process, we knew the old man was meaning what he said. It began with torture, arresting our people, arresting our coordinators, many members of parliament and local leaders from different areas who had come to kind of give us more support, backup, were arrested. We were beaten on the 14th day when the president, actually when General Muwonge was to come and campaign for his candidate, we were beaten. You mentioned Honorable Zake, who is right now still hospitalized. Many of us are still nursing wounds from the legitimate government of General Muwonge. I want to talk about strictly about what happened on the 16th day, very early in the morning at around 6:30 to 7. Voting in Uganda is supposed to begin at 7. But as our people were going, you know, we had curfew that was only affecting the opposition, us. So whenever people moved outside to be deployed, our people were picked. However, the NRM agents were not picked anywhere. So by the time our people reached different polling stations, we realized the ballot boxes were already stuffed. And by a gesture of complaining, asking the presiding officers what had happened, how the boxes could be full even before the time of voting had started, most of our people were beaten. I have cases of a polling station called Kayunga, where the old man who was our agent was beaten just because he was questioning how a box can be full by even before opening of a polling station. So even when we went to the tally center, but before the tally center, we also witnessed incidences at different polling stations where people could come in a drone with guns, scare the crowds at a polling station, and in broad daylight, people go and put ballots in a box. That's what exactly happened with our people being picked from the polling stations. So when we came to the tally center, we had collected almost all our DRR forms, and our team was busy at our tally center doing the tallying. Despite all the rigging that was witnessed during the and in the morning hours, our team was winning. Just like you mentioned, we're winning with over 14,000 votes. So when we were in the tally center, tallying was done. But even with all the irregularities, our candidate, actually me, the NUP candidate, was still winning until they could not do anything more. What they had to do was just to go on and declare Muwonge with the magic figure that you have also looked at, because the figures, when you look at the last 3 digits, there is a lot of magic that was applied.
Right.
Surprisingly, the chairman of the so-called independent electoral commission was there witnessing and watching whatever took place. And after declaring their winner, they had to run and go out of the tally center without even giving us the sheets that we were supposed to pick as candidates. With this, I don't know how much time I have.
Yes, if you can try to summarize it, because we want to get to the questions and answers so journalists can also ask you some questions. So try to summarize it without rushing too much.
All right. With this, we are still on the ground, and we want to appreciate the people of Kayunga and also give them courage, words of courage. We are in a struggle that we know is not going to affect only Kayunga as a district, but a struggle that we know has provided an opportunity for us, first of all, to expose the dictator, assure the entire world as is using police, our security agencies, as his own project or as his own company.
Harriet, did we lose you? I think we may have, Harriet, okay, you're back. Go ahead, please, try to wrap up. Thank you. Are you on mute? We can't hear you.
Hello, hello.
Yes, we can hear you now. Please
Yes,
go
yes.
ahead.
I was saying that this has provided for us an opportunity to expose Genome 7 and his different people. One, it has exposed the police because as I was telling you, our campaigns were characterized by brutality, arrests and detention. And remember, as they were arresting our people, the NRM people were freely moving, bribing people, and doing all sorts of irregularities in campaigns. We exposed the Electoral Commission by showing the entire world that even the 2021 elections were rigged, where our legitimate president, our principal, His Excellency Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, was rigged in the same way. Just like we mentioned yesterday in our press conference, we said that the next step that we are taking is to go on and expose the judiciary and also show the entire world that now the junta, the dictator, has taken all that belonged to Uganda and now it belongs to him as an individual.
Okay. Harriet, thank you so much. And obviously we will get back to you during the question and answer with the journalists. We now move on to David Lewis Rubongoya, who is the Secretary General of the National Unity Platform. The floor is yours, David.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Milton. Where I am, I cannot be able to do the video, so bear with me, I'll just do the audio. I hope that's fine.
Yes, we can hear you.
I think Comrade Nakwede has summarized everything that happened, and because there are many speakers, I'll not say much. I just want to emphasize that the blatantness with which they did this kind of rigging is unprecedented. And for us, we are very, very worried for our country, because I think you can say that this is the most rigged election in history. I don't know what more anybody can do to rig an election. Actually, if you call it rigging, it seems to be an understatement, because here we were at the Tally Center with clear lead, over 14,000 votes ahead of the NRM candidate. They tried to fidget with the numbers at the Tally Center, and even when they tried to fidget with the numbers, we have the voice of the returning officer reading all the results she read. Still, we were about 9,000 votes ahead, even after she had changed some of the results and read different things. Our agents at the Tally Center tried to protest, and what happened was that the police pushed them away. And if you saw the kind of deployment that was in Kayunga in the lead up to the election, with armored vehicles, military vehicles parked everywhere, soldiers in droves and droves filling this district. And of course, if you look at the voter turnout, it was low. And in part, the reason why people do not turn out to vote is because of the intimidation, where a situation where you have the military, the police taking over an election, people look everywhere and their guns. So what do you expect these women in the villages to do, the men in the villages to do, the young people who are trying to come out and exercise their right to vote? And of course, as Comrade Harriet has indicated, just the night before the election, so many of our people were arrested, our polling agents were arrested, the members of parliament who were deployed to, supervise the different electoral areas were arrested. And we were able to secure bail for about 121 of them. But as I speak, some are still in different prisons. So it's very, very unfortunate. And for me, what worries me is that now the dictatorship has reached a point of saying, what can you do? As the previous speaker said, what can you do? I mean, this was daylight robbery of the victory, usurpation of the voice of the people. And so we call upon the world to stand with Uganda as we try to demand for better, as we try to see that our country is redeemed from the oppressive rule.
Thank you, David.
Thank you so much.
So David, while I have you, I guess a listener could pose the question, what are some of the specific issues that the NUP party would like the international community to undertake? David? I think we may have lost David.
We're just unmuting him. Sorry, Comrade Milton.
Is David
I'm there now.
Yes,
so
go ahead.
what's the question again?
No, if a listener is listening, let's say an American, what specific actions would the NUP party want, specifically the United States, to do as part of the international community?
Yeah, so I'm glad that you recognize some of the steps that have been taken by the United States in the wake of a rigged election in January. And
Yeah.
what we've been saying is just essentially is that you should stop funding our operation. You know, the United States government continues to support the military regime in Uganda with billions of money, which money is used, of course, to oppress the people of Uganda. Sometimes they make the argument that, you know, we no longer give money directly to the government, but you know, when you continue supporting the military, when you continue supporting the regime in any other way, then it has enough money to use to buy weapons, to, you know, do patronage, you know, rig votes the way it happened. I believe that most of these officers who engage in these kinds of things, who overtake democracy, are paid by the regime to do this. So that first and foremost, we think that the United States government, and indeed all countries in the world which believe in democracy, should stop recognizing the illegitimate rule of General Museveni and his people, and ensure that more sanctions are put in place, including sanctions under the Magnitsky, against all those who are undermining democracy in Uganda, who are violating human rights with impunity, and other things. So we think sanctions can play a role, but most importantly, denying the illegal regime legitimacy. I think that is, we want the regime to be isolated, because you cannot have a regime which does these kinds of actions blatantly, still being recognized by many, many governments. We think that is wrong, that's reprehensible.
Thank you, David. We will keep it moving. So we will now go to the leader of the NUP party himself, Robert Kyagulanyi, more popularly known as Bobiwine, and many Ugandans believe the legitimately elected president of Uganda from the outcome of the January 14th, 2021 election. The floor is yours, Bobiwine.
Thank you very much for having me, Professor Alimadi, and I'm sending greetings to all of you comrades here. The issues have been detailed by Comrade Nakwede, who was the candidate in the recently concluded Kayunga by-election, where it is clear that she won. We are not just saying she won, but it's clear that she won. But again, what happened in Kayunga recently goes further to confirm what happened in January this year in Uganda, where the internet was switched off, all our campaign team arrested, and even when all that happened, we still floored General Museveni, and he ordered Justice Yabakama, who is the head of the Electoral Commission, to simply announce him as winner. Now, this played again in Kayunga recently, where amid this intimidation, having put me under house arrest to block me from campaigning, where General Museveni was going to campaign using taxpayers' money, having put to jail, having jailed members of parliament, all the leaders that we sent to supervise the vote. Still, the people of Kayunga stood their ground. They did what we encouraged them to do. They were vigilant, they supervised the vote, and even if there was so much ballot stuffing, still Harriet Nakwede Kafero emerged winner. Unfortunately, General Museveni would not take that, like Comrade Nakwede said, having announced that whatever the circumstances, the NRM would decide who would be the leader of Kayunga district, not the people of Kayunga district. So consequently, they announced the wrong person, that they had won. This goes further to just highlight a few of the atrocities that are being committed in Uganda, the absolute disrespect of democracy, the disregard of the rule of law, and General Museveni imposing himself and all the leaders that he chooses for the people of imposing them on the people of Uganda. Like our Secretary General just mentioned, I will only reassert that we are calling upon the international community not to constantly come off as a partner in crime. We are fighting not only the impunity of General Museveni, we are fighting not only the Uganda police that is supposed to take care of the people, but instead is oppressing the people. We are not only fighting the Ugandan military, but we are fighting all that is supporting the NRM regime. While we fight the corrupt dictator, we're also fighting the grenades that are coming from France. We are fighting the guns that are coming from Czech Republic. We are fighting the helicopters that are coming from Russia. We are fighting the cars that are coming from Germany. We are fighting the training that is offered by the United States and the UK. We are fighting the spy network that is provided by Israel. We are fighting the bribes that are provided by the IMF. So we are fighting against our own resources. I want the international community to know that it is the bloodline for General Museveni. General Museveni would not be able to oppress the people of Uganda. He will not be able to massacre the people of Uganda. His military would not be able to do all the illegal and immoral things that they are doing if they were not supported by the international community. They would not be able to spy, to listen in on, violate our privacy if they were not supported by the Israeli technology. And as all of you are aware that not just we that are fighting for freedom in Uganda, but even the diplomats, nobody is safe under the Museveni dictatorship. So we call upon the international community to remember that we are also human beings, to know that the standard of human rights is not supposed to be measured according to the economy of the country. We are just as human beings as the countries from the development partners. We are just as human as other countries where 2, 3, 4 people are murdered and it is probed to its logical conclusion. While General Museveni is massacring people, while he is detaining political opponents, while he is abusing and violating elections with impunity, he is still being fed by the international community, and that is why we request that it should stop. I thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you so much. Before we move on to the next speaker, who is Joel Senyonyi, I'd just like to clarify 1 or 2 things. Harriet Nakwede spoke of the DR forms. For non-Ugandans who may not be familiar with what that is the declaration of results, which is the tallying of the total votes earned by each candidate in each of the precincts. So that is what she was referring to. Bobiwine mentioned the spying assisted by Israel. That was a major story recently in the New York Times, when the New York Times reported that with the use of Israeli technology and spyware, the regime was actually conducting spying on the United States Embassy in Kampala, Uganda. So I just wanted to clarify those 2 items. And now we keep it moving. So we go to Joel Senyonyi, who is the official spokesperson for the NUP party. Joel, the floor is yours. Do we have Joel?
Yes, Professor, thank you so much.
Go ahead. Thank you.
It's such a pleasure to be joining you, colleagues here in Uganda from the media that are joining us. But really, my president, Bobiwine, the Secretary General, and of course our candidate in Kayunga have clearly adumbrated what happened. For us, really, in many respects, this vindicates us, because we went through an election in January and it was clear the blatant brutality. People were killed, many were jailed, the vote rigging, ballot stuffing, the loads of monies that were used, and all these different things. We kept talking about these things, but somehow, you know, there are probably those who thought, well, maybe not, you know, but what happened in Kayunga, because now all the attention was on Kayunga, because the January election was a nationwide election. So the cameras, media, and so on were not able to be everywhere, you know, to see that our agents were being arrested, the brutality. Ballot stuffing and so on. There's just a few.
Joel, your connection is not stable, so we are losing you. You're in and out. Yeah, now we can't hear you at all. Joel, I don't know if you can hear me, but we cannot hear you. I think your connection is not stable.
Okay, I can actually hear you loud and clear. There was just
yeah,
here.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we can't hear you clear, but try again. Let's see how it goes. Continue.
Okay, so really, the point that I was emphasizing is that the Kayunga by-election vindicated us. All that we have been saying, that Museveni deploys brutality, lots of money, the vote rigging and so on, everything got to be seen in clear, broad daylight. And I know Nico is going to display for but also to show here. So we had teams that were at the tally center, and they kept hearing this lady who kept giving an update, a lady called Chobutunji Janet. She's the electoral commission representative in that district. So she kept giving updates, you know, I think hourly or that kind of thing. And they combined all the audios and tabulated what updates she was giving all through. And even that update that she was giving every step of the way till the final one, before they took off about 3 hours to say they are sorting out a couple of things. Yes. Even her voice shows that our candidate Nakwede was by far leading in this election. But Mr. Museveni said, no, I want my candidate to win, and that's the one that will be declared winner. Now, in just 1 minute, one of the things that really have caused Mr. Museveni to have interest in Kayunga,
yes,
you know, lots of mineral resources in that district, and that's why there's been squabbles over the land in Kayunga. The person who was killed, we believe very strongly that the former LC5 chairperson who belonged to NUP was killed. This was a disabled man, and then on this eventful day, very unfortunate event, you know, he was found hanging. Very smart, there was no flakes and so on. This is a man who was using a crutch to walk, you know, but for them to say that he got up a tree and hung himself and so on, absolute hogwash. We believe this man was killed. And the reason why he's killed is because as an NUP leader in that seat, he was frustrating the land grabbing and all the other evil schemes of the regime. And we believe that's why this man was killed. And now Mr. Museveni said, okay, now that this one is out of the way, I must have my candidate there, my person who belongs to the NRM. And that's why it's been a do or die. But I'm glad that the whole world has seen all these things that are happening. And really, on our part, we are reaching out to the international community to say, let's have a focus on Uganda. Mr. Museveni likes to say Uganda is a sovereign state, so we cannot have interference. Yes, we are a sovereign state. But what does sovereignty mean? Does sovereignty mean that the leader of the country can kill, brutalize people in his country, stifle democracy, etc., as the whole world looks on because we are a sovereign state? No, we are part of the international community. And I believe the rest of the world has a responsibility to Uganda. The same way Uganda has a responsibility to the rest of the world. That's why we are in Somalia, in Sudan, and all these different places, doing all manner of things, and yet those are sovereign states. So we are saying what has begun to be done by the US, would like to see that gear engaged a lot more. Would like to see a lot more targeted sanctions. These sanctions actually bite. I know some Museveni officials like to brush these things off and say, well, I don't give a damn about the sanctions and so on, but they bite. And that's why the most recent sanctions on a general called Kaniho, who has meted out untold suffering to Ugandans on behalf of Mr. Museveni. He had to organize some goons to go to the US embassy to protest and so on. It's because these sanctions bite. So they are not in vain. We pray that there gets to be a lot more of
the people surrounding Mr. Museveni, the people that are involved in these acts, electoral commission officials right from the top, then they will begin to know that things are serious. Then they'll begin to know that you cannot do whatever you want to do in a manner so wanton. So we hope that the rest of the international community can really extend this help to Ugandans. This really is not for NUP. It is for Ugandans, because it is Ugandans who are being brutalized. It is Ugandans whose democratic space is shrinking by the day. Their voice doesn't count anymore. So we hope that this can be done for the sake of Ugandans. I thank you.
Thank you, Joel. I just want to elaborate on one or two things that Joel also touched upon. He referred to the recent sanctions by the United States against General Belcandijo, who was the leader of what is called the Chieftaincy of Military Intelligence, which essentially is the secret police. And he was personally accused by the Treasury Department that issued the sanctions of participating personally in some of the torture and some of the beatings, which included sexual torture, and in fact, including the killings of supporters of the NUP party or anybody who had criticized the government. And that is what Joel was referring to. He also mentioned the issue of sovereignty, and that the regime says no other country has the right to interfere in the affairs of the regime. But the regime is happy to take $1 billion in US taxpayers' money. And I would hope American citizens would say they do have a right in how their taxpayer dollars is spent once it's sent to Uganda. Now, this time, we would like the technical people led by Dr. Nico to perhaps put out the technical display and show some of the images and walk us through it. And then after that, we will invite Bruce Afran to make some comments, and he is the legal counsel. Dr. Nico, could you and David perhaps walk us through the images, screen sharing? David? Dr. Nico?
Yeah, we're just working through it. Sorry, just give us a
Okay,
moment.
thank you. All right, sisters and brothers, please, I ask for your patience. Just give them a minute. They will screen share. They will explain some of the data. And then we will get the comment from Bruce Afran. And then we'll quickly open it up for questions from members of the media. And I ask members of the media, please identify yourself and your affiliation before you ask your questions. And since this is a press conference, we will only be taking questions from members of the media. So if you are not a member of the media, I would politely ask you to please unraise your hand. If on the other hand, you're a member of the general public, you're welcome to submit a comment via the chat.
Nico, please, could you should be able to unmute yourself. Apologies about that.
Yes, thank you. Finally, I was able to unmute. So I thank you all for being here and attending this press conference. And let me shortly introduce myself. My name is Nico, and I was the team leader of the UVote team that analyzed the fraud during the 14th January election. And then we had to analyze over 30,000 DORs. And with a team of about 15 or 20 volunteers, we managed to do that. We have shown that Bobiwine actually won those elections. And all the evidence has been compiled in a report called Rigged that is also shared in chats. Now, when this election took place, this is just one district with 338 polling stations. So it's actually a piece of cake for us. And then when I heard from the team that they were able to collect all the declaration of results forms, and those are the forms that conclude the voting in every polling stations. When I heard that we had gathered almost all of them, I knew that we had a very good case, because we would be having all the evidence. And then the first tally results came in on Thursday night, and many Ugandans went to bed very happily, because it showed that Harriet had won those elections with 35,000 votes. And so the surprise was so big when the next day, on Friday morning, the Electoral Commission announced a totally different results. And I was totally flabbergasted, because how could they do that? Because all the declaration of results forms are in our hands. And then fortunately, the principal, Bobiwine, published those declaration of results forms on his Facebook. And since 338 is not too many, me and a colleague from Germany, we started aggregating those DORs. And I will start sharing my screen to show you in about 10 minutes what we've done. And I think I'm now sharing my screen, and I will go to the main page first. Now, this is a Google document. It's a shared Google document, which means that everyone in the world has access to this document with a special URL, tinyurl.com/Kayunga Tally. Me and my co-workers have edit rights for that document, and together we have worked on this document to present to you the vote results for Kayunga. And I hope that I will be making it totally transparent to you how this works. And since there is a question section after this, if there's anything that is unclear, please write in the chat your name and affiliation, and we'll give you the floor to ask a question. So we have concentrated on the two major candidates that got 99% of the votes, Andrew Muwonge and Harriet Nakwede. And in this cell, which is cell number E5, it shows our counts based on 330 polling stations, which is 97.6% of all the polling stations. It shows that Andrew Muwonge got 20,367 votes. So that is really based on every polling stations that we typed in manually into this Excel sheet. And Harriet Nakwede, our count gives her almost 35,000. So another number that was announced was just slightly more than 35,000, but that was because they had included a couple of those declaration of results forms more. And so furthermore, we can say that based on the data that we've entered, that Nakwede won 277 polling stations, and 53 were won by Andrew Muwonge. I'm saying won here with quotes, because the voter turnout in those polling stations was 10% higher than in the polling stations for Harriet Nakwede, which is an indication for ballot box stuffing. Now, let's see where we get this data from. So let's go to this cell, and it's a reference to another sheet, and that sheet is the tally sheet. So the tally sheet here summarizes all the polling stations. So you can see here many polling stations, and I'm now going upstairs in this sheet to show you the total. So the total for Muwonge is indicated here in yellow. And again, for transparency, everybody can just click click here on this total, same number, 20,000. And you see it's highlighted this column here that has all the numbers. So these numbers. So for example, the very first polling station that was entered had 81 votes for Muwonge, 161 for Harriet Nakwede, and the total number of votes for all the candidates was 250. And to make it easy for anyone to find out if this is actually true, it lists here where one can find that DOR. So this DOR is on a Facebook page, this particular Facebook page by Bobiwine. And because Bobiwine uploaded batches of 76 DORs, I have indicated the sequential number. So number 1 of this set is the polling station Kayunga. Number 2 is polling station Banda. Polling number 3 is polling station Kyoto 2. So in this way, we have aggregated just the 3 numbers: votes for Muwonge, votes for Nakwede, and the total number of votes. And so this everybody can access, and they can double check that it is right. Now, Milton, may I ask you, can you just pick a number between 0 and 10, and then I'm going to look up one of these DORs.
9.
Or someone else.
I pick 9.
Okay, pick 9. Then can you please pick one of the sets from 1 to 5?
3.
Okay, so if we go to set number 3, which is this set, polling station 9 is a polling station called Busana. It's a polling station where Muwonge got 27 votes and Harriet got 150. So now I'm switching to Mr. Bobiwine's Facebook page, which I have open here. And is it now showing also Bobiwine's Facebook page?
No, we're still just seeing the spreadsheet.
Okay, then I'll have to I have to do new share, and I have to, yes. No
Don't
problem.
lose the data though.
No, I'm still here. So so now we're looking at Bobiwine's Facebook page.
Yes.
And Bobiwine has uploaded here set number 1 of DR forms, set number 2 of DR forms, and set number 3 of DR forms. So I'm going to click these DR forms, and now I'm going to scroll through them, and hopefully number 9 is the one that we're looking for. So this is number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, number 7, number 8, number 9. Why did you pick such a high number, Milton? So number 9 is Busana. Luckily, it is the same one. So, and this is how we inspected the number of votes. So I hope this is readable in screen sharing, but what I'm reading here is that Andrew Muwonge got 27 votes and Harriet got 150. So let's double check again with the numbers. So that is the same number. So in this way, we have now verified this particular declaration of results. And if any journalist wants me to do another one in the question section, I'm willing to do so. So this is the first part, and this shows everything about how 14,000 votes were acquired more by Harriet. Now, the interesting question, of course, is where do the difference comes from? Because the tally sheet, we have published a tally sheet, but the Electoral Commission has not published the tally sheets. In the Electoral Commissions, they took many weeks to publish the tally sheet. And usually for district elections, they don't even publish it all. But fortunately, the SG David Lewis was insistent with the electoral commissions, and they have shared the tally sheet, the official tally sheet with us. Now, I'm going to now share my full screen so that I can share that PDF also with you. So I'm going now here. And is everyone looking at the PDF of the Electoral Commission?
Correct.
So now this first page, we already know it. The magic numbers: Andrew Muwonge, 31,830, and Harriet Nakwede, only 3 numbers interchanged. But this document contains the tally sheet. And that is information that I only got this afternoon. And as a scientist, those numbers made me very enthusiastic, and I started entering those into the tally sheet right away. So we have a comparison. Where does the difference comes from? So now there's a lot of numbers here, and I'm not even sure now which one I should be showing to you.
Well, I think the one that illustrates the most for the audience, Dr. Nico.
Yes. So in our tally sheet, which I'm switching back to, on this tab called polling stations, this afternoon, me and my comrades, we started entering the data, the Electoral Commission data, and the difference. And so, for example, on the very first polling station, Vale East, Muwonge, according to the Electoral Commission, has 70 more votes than what we see on our DOR. So that is very strange. And shortly, I'm going to give you an example of one of them. Because there are some things that me as a scientist just made me flabbergasted. So here we have all the differences. And as you can see, all these zeros means that our DOR coincides with the Electoral Commission DOR. So for me, I know that the data entry has been pretty good. And so that was good. Then I saw this 100 here. So in Nampagny, 100 more votes in the Electoral Commission sheet. 100. That's 2 booklets, by the way, because the ballots, they are in booklets of 50 ballots. And so when I see 100, I also see 2 booklets of ballots. And we know that in some polling stations, they really did it. So, and then I see another 100 in Kayunga, 100, exactly 100 difference between our DOR and the Electoral Commission. And then here, another 100. That is no coincidence. And so actually, if I go through this list of differences, then I have already identified 7 of these. It's really lazy form of ballot box stuffing. I mean, if you do your ballot box stuffing, then make it a little bit believable. Mm-hmm. But they have really stuffed the ballot box in a way that is unbelievable. For example, there's one polling station where the voters are divided up by their last name. So there's the voters A to M and the voters N to Z. Guess what? In one of the polling stations, Harriet won, and in the other polling station, Muwonge won, and they are totally different, the result. That doesn't make sense. Those are the same families making their votes, and those results should be approximately the same. But because in one of those polling stations, they did stuff the ballot box, and the other, they didn't, that is the only explanation of this difference. Now, I want to finalize by going to one of the biggest differences that we found. So I see here, for example, 621. So let's let's see which polling station that is. It's Kayunga polling station. So according to our DOR, Muwonge has 69 votes. And according to the Electoral Commission, he has 765. That is not just a small difference. So let's just look that up to conclude this demonstration. So for that, I go again to the tally sheet to find the reference to Bobiwine's upload. I use the search function, Kayunga. I think it's this one. So I can see it's number 36. I should have chosen a lower number, but that's a mistake I made, of set number 3. So number 36 of set number 3, and we have to look for Kayunga. So I'm switching back to Bobiwine's page here. Now this was another set, so it's, I apologize that this is going, no, actually this is set number 3. So this is great. So there we go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now I hope I'm not going to be kicked out of Facebook. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 9, 20, 23, 24, 25. You see, scientist means you have to be a bit patient.
You have valuable information, so.
31, we're almost there. 32, 33, 34. Oh, and these ones are upside down. So these are also the complications that you have as a data entrist. That some of your DORs are upside down. This is actually the right one. Kayunga. I apologize sincerely that I chose this one that is upside down. But we only need the NRM votes, and I see here for NRM votes 69, right. And I see for the NUP votes 181. So let's just double check that I'm really doing the right. Yeah, 69 and 181. That is the real votes. So nowhere close to 765 that the Electoral Commission has declared. So the only way for them is to basically fraud this document. They can do it. So because they have, basically they can print any amount of blank DORs that they want. So they could print, they could have another blank copy and fill it out, but they have to falsify the signatures. So I think at a later stage, the Secretary General will share some of these backsides that show that these declaration of results forms have been signed by the presiding officer, by our agent, by the NRM agents, and by any other agents that are around. So all of that have to be falsified by the Electoral Commission to make their tally. And not just for this one, because we've seen that this one is false, but if we go back to the differences that we saw, so all those, what I've done, I colored the ones in red that have a difference of more than 50. Right. And so you can see they're a lot more than a 50 difference. And I have counted the ones I have analyzed 70% so far. 50 of those DORs have a difference of more than 50 votes for Muwonge in disadvantage. And 39 have a disadvantage, 50 votes for Nakwede or more.
Right.
So this concludes this explanation of the sheet. So this sheet is online available. And I give it back to you, Milton.
Dr. Nico, thank you for that remarkable expose and the explanation. Thank you. We now move to our final speaker, Bruce Afran, who is a lawyer and is legal counsel to the National Unity Platform. The floor is yours.
Excuse me.
Hi, Bruce.
Am I muted?
No, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you, Milton. Thank you for
your general comment and your reaction to the expose by Dr. Nico.
Yes, certainly. Thank you very much. Let me first thank you for organizing this and thank Nico for his detailed work. Nico also did similar work in connection with the election results from the January election. One distinction I'd like to make: at the time of the January election, the court held that the NUP did not bring in sufficient evidence in time under the very narrow, tight timeframes, which I think were 14 days. That is a tight timeframe with respect to the entire country's election returns. People don't realize Uganda is a huge country. It has over 30,000 polling places, a population of nearly 50 million people. And the electoral process is a vast undertaking. So it was very difficult for the NUP, any party would have difficulty in bringing all of that evidence from that massive system in the short time frame available at the time of the general election. However, the situation is much different today, dealing with a single Kayunga by-election. Here we're dealing with a single set of declaration of returns from one parliamentary district. And we are able quickly, as you see Nico's analysis shows and Bobiwine's webpage shows, to provide this discussion. Now, one very important point I'd like to make: Uganda's election system is actually foolproof in terms of the return of declarations from the polling districts and precincts. What happens is that in each precinct, the actual votes that are cast are counted. And those votes are recorded and certified by all of the polling agents from the different campaigns who are present. And so when that declaration of return is signed, it's an acknowledgement by everyone present that it reflects the actual count that they visibly saw. So those returns, which are received by the campaigns at the time of the count in the precinct, are the best possible evidence of what the actual vote was. And as the analysis shows, in nearly every case, the DORs reflect a clear win for the NUP candidate, which would be consistent with the prior results in this parliamentary district. And so the 20,367 for Muwonge, the NRM candidate, is obviously a very great defeat, because Nkwete received 34,740 based upon the actual DORs received by the candidates and their campaigns. Now, the government's reversal is, as pointed out, quite surprising, since the numbers are almost identical but transposed. But it would require a 45% difference in the actual tally of the vote between the DORs at the precincts and the DORs as seen by the Electoral Commission. Now, that's obviously impossible. And one control we have to show the falsification at the Electoral Council is the vote for the other candidates. Remember, there are several other candidates from, I'll call them minor parties, not out of disrespect, but because the other two parties can, receive most of the votes. Of the other parties, the original DORs show that there were 2,547 votes cast for all those other candidates. The Electoral Commission's official result shows, it's reversed. The Electoral Commission's official result for the other candidates shows 2,547 votes. The original DORs show 2,642 votes for those other candidates, virtually the same. It represents a proportional change of about 1/3 of 1%. Yet the change between Muwonge and Nkwede is 45%. Now, obviously, if the vote for the other candidates is virtually the same in both the precinct reports and the Electoral Commission's reports, clearly there's been falsification with respect to the two major candidates. There's no reason it would be a 40% shift or more now in favor of the government candidate when the candidates' reports for the other candidates remain virtually the same.
Right.
And so right there we have evidence of the falsification of the vote. The other point I'd like to make legally is that the DORs that are received at the precinct and which clearly show the NUP candidate Nkwede with 34,740 to 20,367 for the NRM candidate Muwonge, those are the legally presumptive valid returns. That is what the EC is supposed to rely on when it calculates the vote. Those returns are signed by every agent for every campaign at the scene, and they are the legal document that shows the report of the vote. And that is what the courts must look at when they evaluate whether the EC's report is false. And so when the NUP candidates go to court this time, we will be able to manifest an argument specifically identifying the actual DORs received at the precinct signed by every witness. And the courts will have to consider whether or not they're going to rely on the legally presumptive return, the DOR at the scene, or the Electoral College's vastly different findings. And we are expecting the judges who see this to do their duty under the law and adhere to the actual legal presumption of the DORs that show a 14,000 vote difference in favor of the NUP candidate. And so we have a legally presumptive record that is available and will go to court. I think David Lewis has made it very clear this will go to the courts. And we expect that the judges who hear these cases will do their duty and face the actual factual record that is legally the presumptive record in Uganda. So that I want to make the point clear that unlike the January election, when there was not sufficient time to gather all this vast evidence, here we have the evidence, we have the legally presumptive returns, and this demonstrates the falsification at the Electoral Commission. In addition, of course, there are numerous records and reports of falsification of votes later, the checking off of hundreds and hundreds of ballots. Nico has identified multiple districts where the vote is actually been recorded at the EC as suspect. But in any event, the presumptive valid returns are those DRRs that were signed and which show a clear 14,000 vote victory for Harriet Nkwede. With respect to the general issue, what is happening in Uganda is that the regime, led by General Museveni, is really attempting to degrade the democratic process across the board. Unless the West steps up and raises significant pressure, we are looking at a process that will gradually erode opposition candidates in parliament. And the regime is demonstrating that it seems to feel a sense of impunity in this process. Only 2 weeks ago, the US issued sanctions against Uganda's intelligence chief. Yet the regime felt empowered to engage in a fairly blatant falsification of the voting record, and more importantly, to engage in violence against the campaigns and to place Bobiwine under house arrest, though he's clearly the opposition leader. So it is partly because the West will not speak out more definitively that this action, that this impunity takes place. We know the West has strains because of the role of China in East Africa, and the West fears China filling any vacuum. But really, the African governments are onto the fact that China will impose strings that are unacceptable. The West has the flexibility and space to issue statements condemning these practices of both electoral fraud and electoral violence. We have been in touch with the relevant foreign policy officials in the US, and they are considering further statements and further actions. Their statement 2 weeks ago, placing the intelligence chief under sanctions, is a major step. We also hope that the government of the UK will begin to distance itself from this regime rather than its constant public statements that it's seeking to do further business with General Museveni. The former colonial power that provided the legal system, which is a good system in its merits and substance, should not be getting closer to a regime that is undermining that legal system. The UK has a moral obligation to distance itself and to become a source of defense for the people of Uganda, for whom it created a legal system that should be one of the best in the world. So we are hoping that that moral message will begin to take root in the UK. We know the US has been much more interested in placing some distance between itself and the regime. And we expect that will continue. We hope the UK and frankly Israel will understand the need to do something similar. Israel's spyware is a violation of law when used in illegal forms. And we do hope the government of Israel will also place these companies under greater scrutiny. In any event, I do want to make the point, the returns Nico has evaluated are presumptively legal, and they demonstrate a clear victory for Harriet Nakwede, who was unfortunately beaten and severely abused in the process. So thank you. If anyone has any questions for me as a matter of law, I'd be happy to address that. Let me also make one other statement, that the International Criminal Court application is still pending. We are going to be supplementing that with witness statements of people who have been abused and frankly tortured. You know many of that. You know much of that from our prior submissions. And that process is continuing and will actually expand. So thank you very much. Thank you, Milton. Thank you, Nico.
Thank you. Thank you, Bruce. So while I have you, before I open it up to other members of media, could you address the issue of timeline in terms of the prospective legal challenge related to this by-election?
Yes, certainly, Milton. I have to say I'm somewhat unclear of the precise number of days. David Lewis, if he's still on, could explain that. I believe it's a 14-day filing period from the date of certification of the election. It's approximately 14 days in any event. And I understand that that will not be a difficult deadline to meet, because unlike the prior election where we had 30,000 districts, here we have we have 30,000 precincts. Here we have one district, one parliamentary district with 200 or 300 potential precincts, and that information is already in our possession. Milton, let me say one other thing. Unlike the last election, the NUP has been able to maintain control of these records. Following the January election, the government surrounded the NUP headquarters, it locked it, it excluded all NUP staff, and it engaged in a pattern of arrest of NUP officials, including some attorneys. This time around, because of the concise nature of this parliamentary district, we have been able to maintain control of these records, and they will go to court intact. And there will be a much different court case on this occasion.
Thank you. All right, so members of the media, please be concise, identify yourself and the outlet you're associated with, your affiliation. So if you're not a part of the media, please do not raise your hands at this point. So if your hand is up, we take it that you're a member of the media. Let's go to Let's go to Dr. Stanley Kitimbo. Dr. Stanley Kitimbo, please unmute yourself if you're a member of the media and you have a question for any of the speakers. Okay, let's go to Eric van der Zanden. Please unmute yourself, identify your affiliation, and then pose your questions to any of the speakers.
Yes, thank you, Milton. I'm a freelancer myself, and I have a question for Bruce. So, based on the potential success of the case in court, also when we take in and we consider that Uganda might be a 30% democracy and a 70% dictatorship, there's this quote from Stalin, which is saying that it doesn't matter who votes, but who's counting the votes. So even though we might have a better case court, I saw a three-step strategy for NUP and also Ugandan opposition over the past 20 years, that it seemed to focus on first the exposure phase, and second the action phase. So the exposure phase is twofold. First, an election. When the election is rigged, they go to court. Then when the case is stalled within court, which often happens not because of the court case, 30% democracy, but the 70% illegal dictatorship influence, we see that then is called upon the courts of public opinion. So that's a different name for protest. However, there was a very interesting analyst from Zakaria Mampili about the walk to work elections 2011, that the same strategy of election, court, and then call for protest was not working because the people at large, they are not willing to protest and die for a lost election of one individual.
Eric, if I beg your indulgence, could you shape it in the form of a question so he could respond at some point?
Yes, so then the question is itself, if it again is stalled in the court, even though we have all the legal measures in place, is it not time for a change of strategy?
Bruce, did you get the question?
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. I was confused by the instructions on muting. I thought I could not unmute. I didn't realize I had muted myself. So thank you. Eric, thank you for the question. Of course, I am a lawyer and I do not control, nor should I control, the policies of the NUP itself in terms of its future strategies. I can recommend certain strategies, legal strategies, and sometimes lawyers go outside of legal strategies. I will say this, that the court process is still very important for several reasons. First of all, many of the judges in Uganda are still independent in their own point of view. And when faced with a clear case that allows no other fair result, even a corrupt judge or one who's lacking courage will be forced in most instances to rule in favor of what the truth shows. And so it's very important to bring these cases and bring them well and bring them with a clear showing of fact. Because even a corrupted system, and Uganda's is not fully corrupted, there are many independent judges who want to do the right thing, will have to act positively in the face of clear evidence. And it is the process, it is the act of using the process in this way that is very important. First of all, it forces judges to do their work as judges, or at least to think as judges. If we don't bring these cases, they fall into a groove and really never get out of it. Secondly, there is a reasonable chance that clear factual showing will force the court to go our way, and that the regime may even yield if they have no choice. Finally, even if the court ignores the actual evidence, its process of doing that will show the corrupted judiciary. And so it's very important to force the court to go through this process, because many of the judges are independent. And where we have a judge or judges who are not independent and ignore the evidence, their action in doing so demonstrates something very important to the world. So we must use this process to force the judiciary in Uganda to do its job, and if it won't, to force it to go through the machinations of supporting a regime that is no longer recognizing democratic rights. So this process is very important to use, either to make the system work or to show the world that it is broken. And we need to do that. The second thing we are doing is we are pursuing the international court remedy and asking the international court to place the Museveni regime in an investigative status. We don't know what the court will do, but once we provide our witness statements, we believe the court will have very, very clear evidence that will push it in this direction. We also will show the international community those witness statements, and that won't happen for several weeks yet. But that process puts constant pressure on the Museveni regime. And the reason it hasn't gone completely in a state of absolute dictatorship is because it knows it will have to answer to the international legal process. So we are pursuing that remedy. Finally, I'll say this. The government's practice of arrest and beatings is designed, as you said, to intimidate the populace. Ultimately, the population of Uganda, the people, will have to become sufficiently disgusted with this that they will engage in protest regardless of the risk. And the more we demonstrate the falsity of this regime, the more the people of Uganda will be willing to assert themselves. I hope that's an answer to your question. And though I'm a lawyer, I did not mean to be long-winded. So please excuse me if I was.
Thank you, Bruce.
Oh, thank you. Perfect.
Let's go to Dr. Stanley Kitimbo. And as we said, if your hand is up, we assume you're affiliated with media, because this indeed is a press conference. Anybody else that just has a general comment, you're welcome to post it on the chat. So let's go to Dr. Stanley Kitimbo. Tell us your affiliation. The floor is yours, and ask your question.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you so much. I am Stanley. I am a freelance journalist, but I'm a human rights activist here based here in Germany. My question goes to my General Secretary, David. As a party, apart from when you go to court, I've seen a number of issues that really the dictator has failed even to respect some of the court proceedings. What will happen if he again lose in the courts of law? And for us to take over the dictator from the power, apart from going to the courts of law, how can we resave our fellow Ugandans that are really dying under the hands of the dictator? Thank you. That's my question to the General Secretary, and maybe also to the President himself.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, thank you for the question. Either David or Bobiwine, would you care to respond to that question? It's sort of very similar to what was actually asked of Bruce. Is David on? Is Bobiwine on? Okay. We're being Zoom bombed. David Steele, did you manage to get rid of that? Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Can we just prevent screen sharing, co-hosts, please?
Okay.
Yes, let's undo the screen sharing.
Yeah, okay.
Let me just say it took the regime a good hour an hour and a half to begin Zoom bombing. So that's a good sign.
After we had completed most of
Yes.
the most critical part. Okay, let's go to African Justice Media.
Another Zoom bomb. The chat is gone.
African Justice Media. Can you unmute yourself, African Justice Media?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you for putting this together. My name is George Justice from the African Justice Media. I want to be so brief with my question, though I have many, but I'll just ask one. These human rights violations, because ours is in the perspective of human rights violations on the African continent. We have been discussing with our brothers from other countries, the DRC, where Uganda is sending the army to go and hunt the ADF, but we see human rights violations still here in Uganda. The by-election that happened in Kayunga still violates human rights, yet Uganda is part and parcel of the 1948 Human Rights Declaration of Human Rights, and it is part and parcel of these international documents? How do we make sure that we, this goes actually to the legal team and also the entire National Unity Platform. How do we make sure that we help these governments of African governments that accountable for what they are doing? Because I see the national legal policy and legal frameworks are not working because the presidents, the governments control them. So how do we make sure that we use the African Union, and also we use the regional systems and also the international human rights? Thank you so much.
Okay, so essentially you're saying because the regime controls all the legal apparatus within the country, why not take advantage of the fact that Uganda is a signatory to several international laws protecting human rights and go to those platforms instead, if I understand your question. Would Bobiwine like to take this question?
Do we know if Bobby is still on the screen, on the call?
I was actually looking. Would David like to take this question? David Lewis?
I don't think we've got David Lewis on, and I'm in the process of trying to unmute Bobiwine, sorry.
Okay.
Is there any chance Bruce could offer his...
In fact, I was going to go to Bruce as well after Bobiwine, but why don't we start with you, Bruce, since we're running out of time as well.
Certainly. I'm only a lawyer. I don't wish to take Bobby's place, of course. Basically, there are multiple avenues internationally to use. First of all, there is always a resource limit. We can only do so much at any one time. However, the African Union does have a court. It is an independent court. To some degree, though, politics weighs into these things. And Uganda being a large East African country and gaining a great deal of US financial and military aid, you know, it may not be fully an independent body at this point. But the African Court is available, as is the United Nations Human Rights Committee approach. The African Court, of course, is a binding court and could be used to seek direct relief against officials, including General Museveni. It would require a full court case to be presented and filed. That can be done by any citizen of Uganda or other East African countries. In addition, the UN process can be used, but that's an advisory process. The ICC is a mandatory binding court, and that's why we focused our efforts there. If the ICC should issue an indictment, that will permanently prevent General Museveni and other leading figures from leaving Uganda and from having any international role. That will be the greatest single factor to undermine their continuing ability to engage in these abuses. I will add a point that is not often looked at. Other states can take action internationally and bring action against Uganda in some of the UN bodies and also the International Court of Justice. And so if a foreign state that is sympathetic to the degradation of democracy in Uganda wishes to intervene, it can bring action against the government of Uganda on behalf of individuals who have been abused from a human rights perspective. And so one thing to do is to seek out those governments that would be sympathetic and would be willing to commence such actions. This is a difficult international proposition because of so many interrelationships between various governments and the major Western powers. But this is available. Finally, I'd like to point out the European Union has been extremely interested and sympathetic to the victims of the regime in Uganda. And it can be approached, and its good offices, as well as some of its administrative apparatus, can be used. But I will say the African Court can be used. It requires a concerted legal effort with witnesses and evidence to be brought forward. It also requires funding to a degree. So if there are interested individuals willing to commence such a process, it will put the regime under further pressure. Let me point out, it is not a perfect process, and some of the member states are somewhat intimidated by the challenge of acting. I hope that's an answer.
Thank you, Bruce. David, were we able to unmute Bobiwine?
1 minute, we should be able to. 1 minute. Your Excellency, you're unmuted if you're able to speak.
And also Joel would be able to answer that question. I think he's still on.
My apologies. I have a terrible line. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Professor, can you hear me well?
Yes, I can hear you well. I hope you can hear me too. Please respond to any of the questions you've heard so far.
Well, you're breaking. I hope I'm...
David?
Yes.
Can you try to communicate with Bobiwine? I don't think he can hear me clearly. Could you ask him to respond to any of the questions posed so far?
Okay, no, that's absolutely fine. I think there's a challenge with the connection. So as he comes online, he'll be able to. We'll leave him unmuted so that he can just interject when he's able to speak.
So it's Joel there who's interested in taking any of the questions posed so far. Also, is Harriet there as well? Harriet Nakwede, feel free to address any of the questions as well.
Actually, I also have another question for Harriet. So she can have two questions, because I want to know how is she doing, because she got quite injured.
Thank you for that question, for the being assaulted by the regime agents. Harriet, would you like to go first?
You muted the wrong Harriet.
Yes, go ahead. Harriet was beginning to speak. We lost her.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor.
Yes, go ahead.
I heard Nicole was asking about my health.
Yes.
We are getting well. We are getting well. We are recovering. I only wanted to say one thing, because there is a question that was asked to the Secretary General about what you want to, or what you would wish as in terms of help. The problem that we have is that the cost of rigging an election in Uganda is insignificant. The regime rigs an election and it just goes without any penalty. I'm happy that we've talked about sanctions. I don't see why a person like Justice Ibiabakama could freely move in and out after knowing that he is the source of confusion when it comes to the electoral process in the country. We request that we are helped and make the cost of rigging an election in Uganda very high. You know, you have been funding different projects that have continuously facilitated the junta. And at the end of the day, the money that is given is spent, not even a half of it is spent on the taxpayers. At the end of the day, you find that the money that is given as facilitating the projects in Uganda is instead used to sustain the regime. So kindly make the cost of rigging an election in Uganda high, and then we shall be safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Harriet. Let's see if we can hear the president of NUP himself, the legitimately elected president, Bobiwine. David, is Bobiwine having audio?
He's on. I think we're still having challenges with the connection, but the request to unmute has been sent.
Okay, very good. So we'll continue then. Joel, is Joel there? Would you like to address any of the questions posed so far?
Yes, I am. Let me try and speak without video. We have a challenge of network connectivity in Uganda. One of the things we need to fix anyway, any serious government in this day and age should be able to fix internet connectivity. 2021, for heaven's sake, you know. Anyway, story for. So one of the issues I wanted to talk about is the court process. Folks asking, and somebody emphasized, I don't know if it was Bruce or somebody, we are going to court not so much because we believe in the court process, but one, because there are some judges who still have good heads on their shoulders. There are some judges who still care about their credibility. Of course, what the regime does, they normally will handpick, you know, but for us, we are saying the writing is clearly on the wall. The DR forms clearly show who won. So let's put the judiciary on the test as well, because the DR forms were signed by the presiding officer of the Electoral Commission, were signed by the agents of the NRM. You know, all the DR forms that we have. So even the NRM candidates' agents, they agreed to these results and so on. So we are taking them to court to say, here you are, tell us what for you as the judiciary. So that's why we are going through this. Of course, there's a lot, but we said, let's put this to the test.
Yes, Joel,
that we get to do this. So I had somebody ask that. Actually, I didn't quite get was connectivity.
Joel, the connection is not that good, but we heard basically you're saying by going to court, you're also putting the court itself on trial, which I think actually makes absolute sense. Okay, so we are running out of time. So what we'll do
without a doubt, we want to put them on trial too.
Yes, thank you, Joel. So we are running out of time. I'm going to go to each of the remaining journalists who still have their hands up, and I will have all of you pose the questions, and then we will open it up to answers from the speakers, and that way we can wrap it, while at the same time giving each of you an opportunity to at least get your questions out. So first we go to Map Media. Are you there? If so, please unmute and pose make it one question so we can get to the other journalists.
Hello, yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for hosting me. Please, I have a few things here. I'm a journalist. Yeah, come again? Yes,
just one question.
Yes, I'm one of journalists for NOP or Kyagulanyi Robert Ssentamu, our president. My question goes to our lawyers there, that when can ICC help? Because in fact, we have no independent judges in Uganda. Even if we are going to try, because we were there, as we journalists, we were reporting live, nowhere we saw Muwonge of NRM winning this election. Nowhere. We were there physically reporting. So when his ICC help in this matter? Because we have no independent judges in Uganda. Thank you very much. I'm Map Media.
All right, thank you. We'll wait for Bruce to handle that question. Let's go to, is it James William Mugeni? Please unmute and pose your one question and tell us who the question is for.
Yes. James William Mugeni. I'm a freelance writer, and this question perhaps will go to any of us who likes to answer. I'm talking about an issue of altruism. How do we occupy space as taxpayers? I'm in USA and I'm a taxpayer here. The taxes that I pay here are the ones that are being abused. If I can tax government of Uganda, if I ask for accountability from government of Uganda, how they use our taxes, why is it so hard for me to ask the US how they use the taxes I pay here, especially if they're using it for killing my people? Thank you.
All right, thank you, James. Let's go to Walu Kaso, JWAHALOU XHASO. Please unmute and pose your question.
Thank you, Professor Alimadi. I'm also a freelancer. My question goes to Bruce. Museveni has been referred to the ICC several times. The most recent referral was by Bruce himself. The question is, why is it taking so long to get a response from the ICC? There is a feeling that Museveni is being protected by an invisible hand. How do you intend to hasten the process of bringing Museveni to book for the atrocities that he has committed against humanity? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Walu, for your question. We go to Prasi. Prasi, please unmute and pose your question. Okay, in that case, we go to Matthew Kayunga. Please unmute and pose your question.
Yeah, hi. So I'm a journalist with the Times of London, and so I wanted to post something specifically around the UK. So one of the main reasons why the UK supports Uganda is because of, well, a want for regional stability. Even going into some government documents, they talk about how Uganda hosts refugees from South Sudan, and they effectively stop the sort of spillover of instability from neighboring regions. What would you say to those arguments? Some might say that, in fact, by keeping Museveni in power, you create more instability due to the anger against him. So how do you specifically go to the UK and counter those arguments that you need Museveni to ensure regional stability, given that's one of the main reasons? Thank you.
Okay, I think those were the hands that were all raised. I'm glad everybody got a chance to get their question out. We are running out of time, so now we will try to get some quick responses. Why don't we start with the last question? The last question was Matthew Kayunga, the Times of London. He posed the question that how would one counter the argument that is used that in fact Museveni is a sort of a provider of regional stability in the region and hosting refugees from all these other countries, when in fact, as Matthew himself suggested, many of these conflicts are instigated by Museveni himself. Would Bobiwine like to take this question, or is he still having connection problems? David.
We'll send the request over and see.
Okay, is Joel Senyonjo also having problems with connectivity, Senyonji?
Joel, are you able to unmute yourself? If you are, it'd be good if you could answer that question.
Right, I hate to pile all these questions on you, Bruce. But while we're trying to get the other connections, why don't we go to Harriet again, and then we'll go to Bruce. Harriet, would you like to respond to any of these questions? I think our speakers in Uganda are having difficulty with the connectivity issue, and we apologize for that. We had them for a while in the earlier stages of this press conference. And obviously you saw the attempted Zoom bomb with the ugly images posted. So we are not surprised if the regime is somehow involved in this disruption as well. So for the time being, we have to come back to you, Bruce, if you could address any one of these questions. If you need me to sort of remind you or summarize some of them, I'll be happy to do so again.
I took notes. I think I have them all. So
Okay.
Let me take a try. You can hear me, I assume?
Please go ahead.
Yes. By the way, with interconnectivity, obviously it's a bit of a crisis that our $1 billion in US aid is not being used by the regime to improve its communications. It clearly does not fully desire connectivity in Uganda.
Right.
With respect to Matthew's question first, the truth is that the West gets very little stability out of Museveni himself. There are small presences in Sudan and Somalia with peacekeeping functions. The Ugandan troops have, carried out those functions, but truthfully, we are bringing pacification to very small places at the price of putting 50 million people in Uganda under dictatorship. This is not the creation of stability. We are gaining a very small degree of stability in Sudan and Somalia, but putting a vast number of people, a major country of 50 million people, under a dictatorship, subject to random governmental violence and the destruction of the rule of law. The West's relationship with General Museveni is creating instability. It is not enhancing stability in East Africa. And the truth is, any government of Uganda, including a democratically elected government, will engage in regional peacekeeping because that's in the interest of everyone in Africa. The West does not need to sponsor a dictatorship with its resulting human rights violations simply to gain peacekeeping functions for the taking of a small number of refugees. Any Uganda government would do that, including a democratically elected government. So I think the West is misled by geopolitical concerns into believing it's gaining stability with the general, when really we are gaining instability among a nation of 50 million people. We are also exporting a tendency of totalitarianism to other countries in the region through our sponsorship of General Museveni. I do hope that answers the Times correspondent's question. Let me turn to the other questions as briefly as I can with our time remaining. With regard to the question about an American taxpayer's ability to influence policy, the laws in the US don't allow a taxpayer to challenge policy simply because they pay taxes. One must use the political process. Go to one's member of Congress, who is always available to meet, especially, and their staff are available, and make it clear what the concerns are. Members of Congress are not immune or unconcerned. And you need to go to those members of Congress who will be interested in these subjects and bring to them the specific concerns that you have. Taxpayer standing doesn't answer the question, but use your position as a citizen of the US and in the UK and in Israel and Germany to go to members of parliament and bring these concerns forward. That process does ultimately make a difference. That's what I would recommend to an American-based individual who's opposed to this regime. With regard to the question of the ICC, we have no wish to hasten the court and the prosecutor's investigation. We want the ICC to be comfortable in reviewing the evidence, and we have more evidence to present. We know they are besieged with human rights violations, and we know they need time to review these cases. The general knows they are looking at him. And as long as they are looking at him, the general is in a weaker position. So we have no desire to hasten that process. We want the ICC to be comfortable and engage in the process as it sees fit. We will be presenting additional evidence to the ICC, and we know they will take that seriously. So we want the ICC process to continue as it normally does. We don't wish them to reach a hasty decision by any means. Finally, with regard to actually, I believe that answers the questions.
Yes, there were two actually separate people that asked about the ICC. Okay,
yes, I think I did cover them, Milton.
I would like us to conclude this press conference, but I would like to go back to our speakers in Uganda one more time, if they can give us a closing comment. And that is, of course, if they're able to make the connection. Joel, are you able to make connection? Can you hear us? Can we hear you?
Okay, I can hear you. I'm hoping.
I can hear you. Give us quick closing comments, please.
One, I want to quickly emphasize the question of the way Mr. Museveni keeps hoodwinking the West to say, look.
Oh, good. Yes, yes.
You don't go here.
If you're not speaking, please mute yourself. If you're not speaking, go ahead. Continue.
Okay. Yes, so I was saying that Mr. Museveni likes to hoodwink the West, you know, that if we don't go to Somalia, if we don't go to Sudan, if we don't go to DRC and all these different places, the whole region will burn and so on, you know, and so they get to fund him to extend his empire. That's what Mr. Museveni keeps doing, and he keeps trying to bully everybody. He'll go all over the place. And sometimes you're wondering, so have we gone to keep peace? Have we gone to, and that's why, for example, I'm a member of parliament. We have been querying our going to DRC as members of parliament because we did not follow the law, especially because there's history. We went to DRC many years ago, apparently chasing after rebels. And what did we do? We looted. Our soldiers looted. Government officials, some of whom are ministers in Museveni's government today, looted, you know, gold, minerals, timber, etc., etc. And then Congo took us to the International Court of Justice and we were fined $10 billion US. We keep trying to negotiate that downwards and so on. We've not paid the penny, you know, and we are back again. So these expansionist policies of Mr. Museveni, we are hoping that the West will not fall into his trap. When he goes to them, he softens himself and says, look, you know, I'm a regional peace broker and so on, support me to go here and there and so on. He's only trying to expand his empire, but also well knowing that once he's in these places, he, together with his men, will loot and do all these different things. So it is hoodwinking. I hope that the West can wake up to the realities about some of these things. That said, I want to appreciate all of us that have been part of this call, the international media, our colleagues in the diaspora, and so on. As you realize, these challenges with connectivity. As a country, we've spent billions of shillings on internet connectivity, but this is money that keeps being swindled. And then the taxpayer does not get value, you know, for our taxpayer money. So there's so much drama around that in 2021, you can have challenges with connectivity in the center of the city. I think it's deliberate. You know, Museveni has up to now still cut off Facebook. He doesn't want us to connect to the rest of the world. So it's deliberate that even a call like this one, they will target it deliberately and so on. But want to appreciate you. We hope that our voices can go out there, the voices of Ugandans. Ugandans are saying the rest of the world is friends to Uganda. Please listen to the cries of Ugandans. Ugandans are being brutalized, they're being killed. Our democratic space is shrinking. Something has got to be done. You know, Mr. Museveni will again hoodwink the West and say the help that you're sending, it is helping all Ugandans. These opposition people, they don't want you to help the poor and so on. But can the West do a real proper audit of the aid that they send on an annual basis? Is it actually reaching the targeted people, the ordinary folks who are poor? Is it actually doing that? Or is it being swindled? Is it being misused to continuously suppress the voices of Uganda? So these are questions that would like to be highlighted. Otherwise, I want to thank you Professor Alimadi. Thank you for putting this together. Nico, Bruce, and the rest of everybody. Thanks a bunch.
Okay, thank you for that. And also, I might want to add, in terms of Uganda's, the judgment in favor of the Congo at the ICJ, there's a very interesting article that did not get enough publicity. The Wall Street Journal published it on June 8, 2006. And that article said the government of the Congo took that same set of facts that was in its favor at the ICJ to the ICC and asked the ICC to also launch an investigation of alleged crimes by Uganda's military in the Congo. And the article said General Museveni himself contacted then Secretary General Kofi Annan and asked him to block that criminal investigation, which is very remarkable. And then Annan said, I don't have that power. But it seems that somebody with the power blocked that investigation. Otherwise, General Museveni might have been indicted like General Omar Bashir in the Sudan. Okay, let's go quickly to Harriet, if she can get connectivity. Harriet, do you have any final comments?
Excuse me, Milton, there was a gentleman from the Netherlands that has been trying to raise his hand, but had some problems.
My apologies.
Okay.
Could we call on that individual?
Yeah, so his name is Marnix, and he is a journalist, if I'm correct, for the Volkskrant and NRC. And Marnix, please correct me if I'm missing out on something.
Please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much for allowing. I'm a freelance working for NRC in the Netherlands and also the weekly De Groene Amsterdammer. I'm very curious. I'm impressed by all the evidence you showed, but the elections has been last week. What is the reaction of the authorities on your new facts, accusations? I mean, they cannot stay silent after all this evidence, I think. A second question was, in the beginning, it was mentioned that the party agents were arrested. Do you know how many party agents were arrested, perhaps? And did it really prevent them to checking the results? And thirdly, you're talking about the judges, that some of them are still independent and doing good work. And I'm just curious, but there's no time, I understand it, to know what's the situation now with the 2 MPs who are accused of murdering 29 people at least, Mr. Segirinya and Mr. Seswanyana, also from the NUP. Thank you very much.
Okay, I guess the question, part of it could go to David, or if David does not have connectivity, we would come back to Joel. And part of the question can also come back to Bruce.
Yes.
Because Bruce is the one who said that some of the judges are still relatively independent. So Bruce, would you like to get yours out of the way first? And then in terms of the party agents arrested, we'll try to see if we can get connection with David or with Joel.
Thanks.
Certainly, thank you. I appreciate the question. You know, Uganda is a big country. It has a well-developed legal system. It is not fully totalitarian. Judges do their work from a day-to-day basis. Most are not corrupt. Some, perhaps many, are intimidated by the regime, and that's a very serious problem. But there are judges who are still independent, and there are judges who will, in fact, exercise that independence. And in fact, during the run-up after the presidential election, there was a dissenting Supreme Court justice.
Right.
Who specifically felt the case should proceed. And she was met with power being turned off in the courtroom, and she was forced to break her way in, basically. And her notes were taken, but she was presented a dissenting view. And she faced no retaliation and no retribution. And so judges can do their work. And it's very important to understand that the international community will not tolerate or sit by idly if leading judges are arrested. And there are many judges who are acting from conscience and their professionalism and will do so if given the evidence and the information. And I as a lawyer, I can only stress this point. And I would say that if judges fail to do their duty, that's important too. That failure demonstrates the danger to the system. So either way, we need to proceed with those processes.
Thank you, Bruce. The journalist also wanted to know the number of party agents who have been arrested while trying to observe these elections. So could David answer that question if he's available? If not, Joel, could you address that question?
And also Harriet could address that question.
Yes.
Okay. So number one, in 30 seconds, I just wanted to emphasize the question of judges. There's about 3 categories of judges in our country. There's judges who are cadre judges, clearly in bed with the regime. Then there are judges who are not necessarily in bed with the regime, but they're intimidated and so on. You've heard me say time and again, intimidate them publicly. You know, you cannot take us back to those days and so on. He does that. And so some of them literally freak out. But then there's judges who insist they must be able to do the right thing. Those are the fewer ones, that's for sure. But we still hope and pray that cases like these can land in the hands of those who are saying the right thing must be done. But even if eventually a case like this one lands in the hands of a cadre judge, again, like somebody said, let's put the courts on trial, because the evidence is overwhelming, it is clearing, it is, you know, as clear as daylight.
So we want that to be able to come out too. Just like Bruce has been talking about the contestation there was in the Supreme Court, majority of the judges, including the Chief Justice, were really on the side of the regime, that the Chief Justice had to steal the judgment of this dissenting judge who was saying, no, I think NUP has got a case here. They are raising critical issues. So it's important for that to come out too. So anyhow, going to the issue of the agents that were arrested, we had several people, over 100 people were arrested in Kayunga. A number of them have since been released. People were arrested, including members of parliament. 4 members of parliament were arrested, mayors, councillors, and our ordinary folks, Over 100 of them were arrested. A number of them, like I've said, have since been released. Some spent a number of days in jail. They have since been released. Others, we are still trying to secure their freedom. Now, the thing about these arrests, they are targeted to demobilize us on election day, because all these people that were arrested were agents at different polling stations to observe, because each candidate is supposed to have agents at each polling station to observe what's going on, etc., etc. So some of these were arrested in the night, such that they are not available in the morning at polling stations to observe what's happening. And that's why people were reporting at 6 a.m. and they would find ballot boxes full, that people began voting at 5 a.m. and yet voting is supposed to begin at 7. So agents are meant to make sure that doesn't happen. So when they're not there, these guys do whatever they want to do. So they were targeted arrests. They would arrest these people in the night before the election. Then others were arrested when they reported to polling stations to do their work with letters saying, I'm an agent for candidate Nakwede. And then they would be arrested saying, you're going to cause chaos here and that kind of thing. Of course, they had to come up with something. So after the election, that's why most of them were actually released, because they had already served the intended purpose of their arrest, to take them out of the picture. Then these guys could be able to do what they wanted to do. So there's, a few, about 20 or so, I need to get the exact number right, of those that are still held behind bars, those that we know anyway, because there are many other people that get arrested. Harriet Nakwede, our candidate, will elaborate on that many people get picked up. They know you are a supporter of NUP or the NUP candidate, then they arrest you and so on. So these that I'm talking about are those that we know, people that, because many times people are arrested and you don't get to know about it until a month later, that kind of situation. Now, finally, hello, someone saying something?
The arrest of the 2 members of parliament who allegedly, and then subsequently charged for murder, mass murder.
Yes. So our members of parliament, Honorable Muhammad Sekirinya and Honorable Alan Sewanyana, were picked up months ago. It became like a joke. These are members of parliament who, even at the time many of these killings were happening, they were out of the country. One was actually at the Olympics and so on. But Mr. Museveni had to find some kind of straw to clutch onto. So they get these guys, frame them up, and they say, you're the ones who have been killing people in Masaka. There's nothing to link them, like no connection whatsoever. But that's what Mr. Museveni wants to do. He wants to be able to arrest many of the NUP leaders, and that's why he's pushing for the removal of bail for capital offenses. That they will trump up charges on any of us, take you away and keep you for months. You can't even be granted bail. And this is how Museveni operates. It's not the first time that he gets to do this. When Dr. Besigye was a leading opposition figure, you remember all the trumped up charges, rape, terrorism, treason, etc., etc. Same thing happened to Bobiwine. He still has so many charges on his neck. You remember in Arua, they planted guns in his hotel room, until one brave officer said, I'll not sign that charge sheet because we checked the room. There were no guns, there were no ammunition and that kind of thing, but you could clearly see, the state is so ridiculous. They'll get stuff and flood it in a room and say, this belongs to you, just because they want to keep you away. So we believe that these members of parliament are being held unfairly and illegally. And even the trial has failed to kick off, because we're saying 2 things. Number one, grant these people bail. They're not going to run away. You know, if anything, they were the very first ones to take themselves to police when they received summons. Police at the first instance did not arrest them. They took themselves because they're responsible citizens. And so we said, release them on bail. When you're ready to start trial, they'll come. But Mr. Museveni just wants to hold on to them. Then we said, okay, can you hasten the trial? Can you start the trial? You know, so that these people can prove their innocence. Trial has not begun up to date. So Mr. Museveni just wants to hold on to these leaders, and he wants to do the same for several others. Very despicable.
They've been tortured. Reportedly, they've been tortured. Is that not correct, Joel?
Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. Actually, there are nursing injuries, and as you know, Ugandan prison, you know, health centers are in a shambolic state. I mean, even the non-prison health centers and so on are in an ailing state. So those in the prisons are worse off. All they are given is painkillers and so on. And that's one of the reasons why we kept insisting, grant them bail so they can get better treatment, because they were beaten and brutalized, especially when they were rearrested. You remember the very first time, there's a judge that granted them bail. Again, going to the issue of some judges are still very sober. So there's a judge that said, look, the offenses that they've charged these people with, yeah, they are ordinary offenses, but according to the law, they have a right to bail. So I'm granting them bail until prosecution is ready to start, is ready to, you know, to get the ball moving. And no sooner as they were walking out of the prison gates, there are these drones, you know, cars called drones, with armed thugs, I'll call it, because they were unidentifiable and so on, masked up with guns, got them, put them in these cars, beat them up so badly. To date, they're still nursing injuries. You can imagine how Mr. Museveni does not care about the rule of law. That a judge will grant bail, but as these people are getting out, they get rearrested, not by uniformed police officers, no, but by gun-wielding thugs who beat them up and so on. You know, Segirinya's foot is in a bad shape. Honorable Sewanya now was also hurt in many parts. And so they've not been able to access better healthcare. And that's one of the reasons why we've been insisting, grant them bail so they can get treatment, because you're not going to try dead people. Once these guys die in your custody, you will not try them. You want to try them, and they're saying, we also want to face trial and prove our innocence, but they can't do it when they're dead. And that's the case we're still trying to make.
Thank you for that. Harriet, if Harriet is still with us, could you respond to any one of those questions and also give us your closing comments, please?
I think we've lost Harriet.
Lost Harriet? Okay, so what I'll do is, since we have problems making connectivity with Kampala, I see that some journalists have just joined us recently at the tail end of this discussion. Let me say clearly, please put your hand down if you're not a journalist. Keep your hand up only if you're a journalist and you still have one final question. Okay, I see that all the hands are down now. On that note, I now bring this press conference to a conclusion. Any final comments from David Steele?
Thank you so much, Professor Milton. Thank you for moderating this conference, this press conference. I'd like to thank all those of you who took the time to join us, and those of you who participated in presenting and asking questions. It's quite clear, the writing is on the wall. The dictator will remain acting with impunity, and the blatant robbery of the election in Kayunga just shows how far he's willing to go. It's really good to hear from Bruce with regards to the options, and obviously from the representatives from NUP with regards to next steps. The next thing is essentially to all those of you who really believe in a true free Uganda, keep standing up for what is right, and do not give up hope, because it's only if we stand up and continue to demand for the observation of human rights, the rule of law, and true democracy that we as Ugandans deserve, will we only deliver that change. So thank you so much. Over to you, Professor Milton.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Bobiwine, for participating when you had the connectivity. Thank you, David Lewis. Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Bruce. And thank you for the presentation, Dr. Nico. And thank you, everybody who participated in today's. I did not intend to keep it this long. We've been here for 2 hours and 15 minutes, and it seems like we could go on, which shows to me that there's great interest in what is going on in Uganda. So we will perhaps have another occasion to have a similar press conference in the near future. Thank you, everybody. Have a nice day. Have a nice morning. Have a nice evening. Goodbye.
Having me, Professor Alimadi, and I'm sending greetings to all of you comrades here. The issues have been detailed by Comrade Nakwede, who was the candidate in the recently concluded Kayunga by-election, where it is clear that she won. We are not just saying she won, but it's clear that she won. But again, what happened in Kayunga recently goes further to confirm what happened in January this year in Uganda, where the internet was switched off, all our campaign team arrested, and even when all that happened, we still floored General Museveni, and he ordered Justice Yabakama, who is the head of the Electoral Commission, to simply announce him as winner. Now, this played again in Kayunga recently, where amid this intimidation, having put me under house arrest to block me from campaigning, where General Museveni was going to campaign using taxpayers' money, having put to jail, having jailed members of parliament, all the leaders that we sent to supervise the vote. Still, the people of Kayunga stood their ground. They did what we encouraged them to do. They were vigilant, they supervised the vote, and even if there was so much ballot stuffing, still Harriet Nakwede Kafero emerged winner. Unfortunately, General Museveni would not take that, like Comrade Nakwede said, having announced that whatever the circumstances, the NRM would decide who would be the leader of Kayunga district, not the people of Kayunga district. So consequently, they announced the wrong person, that they had won. This goes further to just highlight a few of the atrocities that are being committed in Uganda, the absolute disrespect of democracy, the disregard of the rule of law, and General Museveni imposing himself and all the leaders that he chooses for the people of imposing them on the people of Uganda. Like our Secretary General just mentioned, I will only reassert that we are calling upon the international community not to constantly come off as a partner in crime. We are fighting not only the impunity of General Museveni, we are fighting not only the Uganda police that is supposed to take care of the people, but instead is oppressing the people. We are not only fighting the Ugandan military, but we are fighting all that is supporting the NRM regime. While we fight the corrupt dictator, we're also fighting the grenades that are coming from France. We are fighting the guns that are coming from Czech Republic. We are fighting the helicopters that are coming from Russia. We are fighting the cars that are coming from Germany. We are fighting the training that is offered by the United States and the UK. We are fighting the spy network that is provided by Israel. We are fighting the bribes that are provided by the IMF. So we are fighting against our own resources. I want the international community to know that it is the bloodline for General Museveni. General Museveni would not be able to oppress the people of Uganda. He will not be able to massacre the people of Uganda. His military would not be able to do all the illegal and immoral things that they are doing if they were not supported by the international community. They would not be able to spy, to listen in on, violate our privacy if they were not supported by the Israeli technology. And as all of you are aware that not just we that are fighting for freedom in Uganda, but even the diplomats, nobody is safe under the Museveni dictatorship. So we call upon the international community to remember that we are also human beings, to know that the standard of human rights is not supposed to be measured according to the economy of the country. We are just as human beings as the countries from the development partners. We are just as human as other countries where 2, 3, 4 people are murdered, and it is probed to its logical conclusion. While General Museveni is massacring people, while he is detaining political opponents, while he is abusing and violating elections with impunity, he is still being fed by the international community, and that is why we request that it should stop. I thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you so much. Before we move on to the next speaker, who is Joel Sinyonyi, I'd just like to clarify one or two things.
Yes, friends, thanks for being on this international press conference. I'm very sure you heard each and every submission of all our comrades, the President, the Secretary General, the spokesperson, the international media platforms that have been on this global press about Kayunga election fraud. Yeah, this is actually the end of it all. All I ask of you to do is to push harder, to push further this message, as well continue following these platforms. You've been streaming on almost 100. Yeah, it has been 100 streams that I created. Only that there are 50 something pages that have been showing live, and this our YouTube channel, that is the JBMuwonge. Then we have JBMuwonge TV channel for those who did not know about that. To get it, actually the link is there in the comment section. Just click on it, and we shall always be passing our message on that TV channel, JBMuwonge TV channel. I thank comrades that have been behind this entire organization. That is the David Steele, Dr. Alimadi, Militon, Dorcas, and the very many zenaze kubrodika stinga era ogwange nkoze era ngumaze. Thank you very much. Bana itemwerabira ku clicking on that link. That is JBMuwonge TV channel. Yeah, make sure to missing out on any update. Thomas Kajez, my brother, thank you for being on. Farouk King, Barbara Bana, mwebale nyo kuberako, mwebale kuberangira muberako always. Let me also stop it here. Na yete chikoma wano. Message mujongere, it has been a very wonderful one. It has been a very, very insightful press conference, submissions from our leaders. Nakwede Harriet, she's such a very well composed lady, man. This lady Nakwede Harriet, actually that's why very many of these NRM guys, they fear her. The likes of Nanta Banabasigadde. She's well composed, she's well articulate, she's, man, when she speaks, she simply just touches your heart. Ayogera bulungi. President oyendooza mwamutegeera. Joel Sinyonyi, David Lewis Lubongoya, man, NUP is blessed. Guys, we are blessed. Let us use this blessing to make sure that we overturn things. We make sure that we redirect this country back to the right path. Atenga tujja kikola.